Welcome to the Lake Lewis Jr. Show. Appreciate you joining me as always. And it's a busy time right now if you're an NFL fan, and in particular if you're a Washington Commanders fan, because the draft is tomorrow, Thursday evening. The Washington Commanders are on the clock at pick number 29, and it's a little bit of a shift for us who covers the team. We're used to being early and often over the years as far as high draft picks. And, a lot of times they've been in the mid rounds, but they were never poor enough to be picking number one, and they were never really good enough to be picking in the back end of each round. Well, guess what? Last year, the Washington Commanders went to the NFC Championship game, as everyone knows. So now they'll be picking at number 29, and it'll be interesting to see exactly what they do. Before we go any further into the show, if you'd like to subscribe to this show, this podcast, you can do so very easily by going to any of your favorite podcast carriers, such as Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, Spreaker, you name it. The podcast is on there, and it's on there because of you and your support. So please, please, please subscribe to those if you want them in audio form. If you like to watch the program, which a lot of you are probably doing right now on YouTube, you can easily do so, subscribe by going to the Lake Lewis Jr. Show podcast, which is on YouTube, or you can subscribe to the channel at the Lake Lewis Jr. You can naturally listen to the show on Tuesdays on terrestrial radio. If you live in the DMV region, area, whatever you want to call it. I'm old enough to remember when it wasn't called the DMV. It was just Washington. Well, now if you live in the DMV, which is Maryland, Northern Virginia, and DC, you can listen to the show on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. on AM radio 1450 and FM radio 95.9, and that's all from the great folks over at Radio 1, Urban 1, and the station is WOL. So we're getting to you in a lot of different ways. You can also, VTS Sports Radio in Southern Virginia is carrying the program as well. So appreciate everyone who's reached out to me and said they were fans of the show and wanted to get them on their respective stations, and that's what we're doing. So we always have room to grow and keep getting better. So listen, yesterday at Ashburn in Commanders Park, we were out there, and Adam Peters and Lance Newmark spoke about the draft, and it was a pre-draft presser. So obviously they couldn't say anything pressing, couldn't say too many things, because obviously they can't tip their hand with the draft coming up, because there may be some late night maneuvering and wheeling and dealing going on. But they just kind of spoke to us as far as just the things we already knew, what kind of players they're looking for, the draft process. They started the press conference, praising everyone in the scouting department, down to, the staff in the building, even the Chef Connor. They shouted out everyone, and I thought that was pretty awesome. Really nice gesture on their part, just to show the continuity and the community that they've built out at Ashburn, at Commanders Park. Everyone's rowing in the same direction, and it showed last year, and it seems like nothing's going to stop. It's going to continue to go this year. One of the things that I wanted to do was play back. I had two questions that I asked Adam Peters as far as the draft, as far as, what he thought about now that the Eagles may be that budding rival, and that's the team that Washington has to go through to get to the Super Bowl. Would he do what he did last year? And that was trade with the Eagles within the division. And I asked him what was his thoughts on that. Last year you made a trade with the Eagles, and now that's a team that you're going to have to try to get through to get to where you want to go. Does it change this year for you if that call were to come from them as far as possibly trading or any team in the NFC East?
Yeah, that's another really good question. You think about that, but I think it's like a lot of things, case by case. And what is the trade? Is it the best move for your team? And you can't do – I don't personally believe in being scared about trading with a team within your division. If you think the trade's a good value for you and you can get some good picks to help your team get better, then definitely consider it. Some cases it won't be, and so some cases you think, all right, maybe we don't want to do that for whatever reason. But I don't think that we'll ever shy away from that, taking those calls, and a lot of times you'll have a lot of picks on, or a lot of trades kind of lined up, and in that particular instance, the Eagles trade was by far the best trade in terms of value that we got, so we made that trade.
And then as far as your board, the players that you guys value, you went out and brought in Deebo Samuel, obviously to pair up with Terry. But if there's a receiver, I'm not going to mention any names, but if there's a receiver that drops and he's at 29, is that something that you guys would clearly jump at, or considering that's already a position of strength right now?
Yeah, I think really every team every year is a little bit different, right? And so we're really just what's the best player that's going to help us now and in the future, and because that room's going to change next year, just like every other room in our building is going to change each year. It's going to evolve. So, if the best player we think is the player that's going to help us more than any other position, then we won't hesitate to take that.
So as you can see, Adam Peters isn't scared to make the trade if it's something that he feels like the Washington Commanders will benefit from. And that just goes to show you exactly how strong they feel as far as their own scouting department. I know everyone talks about Harry Roseman and the Eagles, and, people call him the mad scientist. Well, I kind of think there's one in the building in Washington as well, and I think that that's going to be a really nice budding rivalry, as we've talked about. Not the old traditional NFC East by default rivalry, but I mean like a rivalry because of the two best teams in the NFC, or two of the best teams in the NFC going at it in the division to get to the Super Bowl, maybe meeting for a third time in the playoffs like we saw last year. So again, he isn't afraid to trade with the Eagles or any team in the NFC East. And I also liked his answer when I asked him as far as, positions of need or positions that are strengths right now. And I think with the acquisition of Deebo Samuel, clearly Washington's wide receiver room is greatly improved to pair anyone up now with Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel. So could a guy like Luther Burden Luther Burden II actually be on the table for Washington if he's there at 29? And he's a dynamic receiver out of Missouri. If you don't know much about him, I encourage you to look him up by tomorrow, because he's going to be a guy that a lot of teams are going to regret not taking if they let him slide. So lots of different things that we're going to be talking about this week. And, Friday I'll be out at Commanders Park again. So tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, I'll be out there. And then Saturday, hope to see some of you guys out at the Fan Fest that the team's going to be having. My better half, she needs no introduction. Everyone knows who she is, but she's actually emceeing the event. So I'm going to be out there supporting her, and hopefully I can run into some of you guys there. So look, if you have any questions as far as the draft, as far as who you think that, the team may be taking, or what do I think, email me. It's simple, folks. And you can also email me if you want to come on our Friday show. I'm still going to try to do that show on Friday. I'm probably going to be doing it from Commanders Park. So if you want to be part of the show, all you have to do is email me. And if you want to ask me any questions about the draft or anything for that matter, all you have to do is email the show at thelakelewisjrshow@gmail.com. Once again, it's thelakelewisjrshow@gmail.com. Before we go off the air, I do want to give you just a couple of names. I'm not going to break them down, but just some names that I hear things about that potentially could be in play. Luther Burden is one of those guys, so, keep your eye out on him. I do think Kyle Kennard might be a guy that, from talking to, some folks that I know rep him, he could be a guy that could be there for Washington. He was the SEC Defensive Player of the Year at South Carolina, so he's a guy that has the pedigree. We'll see if, he's available, but he's a guy that could be a situational pass rusher for Washington, maybe a third down specialist where he can just pin his ears back and get after the quarterback. So he may be a guy that you may hear some things about. There's another guy that I think, may go in the late rounds. That's a really heady football player, smart guy, really great tackler, and that's Eugene Asante from Auburn. So remember some of those names, that we're dropping, for some of you guys as well. So, another guy that I'm really high on that I like quite a bit is Princely Umanmielen, from, he was a guy that did a lot of great things at Ole Miss. And, I almost got tongue tied there because he started his career at Florida where he was wreaking havoc with the Florida Gators. And then he spent his final year last year in Oxford, Mississippi, playing for Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. And he had 10.5 sacks. So that's another guy that I, keep hearing some grumblings about. So keep your eye on him. And then, of course, there's guys like Josh Connerly, and the team met with Josh Connerly. He's another player that, could be a surprise pick, and not because he's not good. He's great. He's an All-American talent at tackle. And we know Laramie Tunsil was signed. Brandon Coleman, who played left tackle last year, may get first dibs and look at right tackle, but you never know. I still think Brandon Coleman probably plays better as a guard, and that's what he played most of his career at TCU. So maybe a guy like Josh Connerly could be there, and Washington takes him. So there's going to be so many storylines. Another guy that, I'm hearing a little buzz about, not early or anything, but just at some point in the draft, maybe mid to late. But a guy like Kobe King, linebacker from my alma mater, Penn State. So just giving you some little names and some things like that maybe you haven't heard from or heard about, but just keep your eyes and ears tuned to that tomorrow, and especially on Friday when it really gets into the deep part of the draft. So, my friends, just wanted to jump on real quick. Did a show yesterday on WOL and had a great time with that, and was out at Commander's Park for the press conference. Like I said, today was supposed to be a day of rest, but it's never rest when you're covering this team and when you're covering the NFL like I do. So remember, if you want to check me out on some of my other endeavors, you can follow me on heavy.com as an NFL writer on there. You can go to sportsjourney.com, where I have two young guys, DJ Bland and Connor Forrest, running that now. And really, that's their vision at Sports Journey. So everything that you see going on, they're really behind it. And I'm very proud of those guys to alleviate that for me, because I couldn't do it with all the other stuff that I have going on. So greatly appreciative for your support as well. This thing's rolling, man. The show, the podcast is rolling because of people like yourself. And remember, if you want to come on Friday for Fan Day, I am going to try to do it, even though the draft can be going on. I'll try to step out of Commander's Park and do it for a little bit. Can't promise you it's going to be an hour like we normally do. Sometimes we do an hour and a half, but we're going to have to shorten it up on Friday. But nevertheless, you are more than welcome to come on. All you have to do, once again, is email me at thelakeLewisJr.show@gmail.com. My friends, I appreciate you. Have a good one, and we'll see you tomorrow.